I do not think that a long-term decarbonisation goal is harmful. I think a long-term decarbonisation goal could be good, providing all the limited negotiating time is not spent talking about the long term, and as a consequence we don't focus on the short term. I think the priority is to get emission trajectories to change now, and the long-term goal is a second priority.
Okay. Another thing which is going to be very salient in Paris is this idea of 5-year reviews, and you included a demand on the industrialised countries for climate finance in those 5-year reviews. To what degree they're getting towards their commitments. Do you think that is possible?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's not only possible, I think it's essential that we have a review every 5 years of a broad review of the adequacy of commitments, so are we on track to meet the 2 degrees, and a review of the implementation of commitments that have been made. So are countries meeting their commitments on finance, on technology, on capacity building? Are developing countries actually being helped to implement their INDCs? And the review mechanism should look at all of those aspects.
And on the topic of climate finance, the most recently cited figure is the 60 billion or so in the OECD report. There's been some criticism or mistrust of that from developing countries. How much faith can we put in that figure alone? And where does it get us on the path to 100 billion?
Well, the problem, I think, is since we don't have a single financial mechanism through which money related to the climate convention is channeled, it becomes very difficult to track the money. Mm-hmm. But if you were to say, okay, instead I'm going to track how much different companies, countries, philanthropists commit to a specific national plan of a country, then it gets a lot easier to track.
Okay. You even raised the idea of discussing a review of the entire UN FCCC process after Paris, depending on what the outcome is. How could that work in practice, and what would be up for discussion?
If we see an agreement in Paris that focuses on national action, that focuses on national plans, that focuses on getting implementation moving, then you're in a different era. Then you're no longer in the era that is focused primarily on global commitments, but more an era that is focused on national implementation. And I think you need a different kind of mechanism to oversee or supervise or monitor or enthuse national implementation, that it should be much more focused on what are countries actually doing and how can they be helped to do the things that they want to do.
And you also raised, well, you seem to refute the idea that the sanctions are never possible, and that the kind of consensus now is that a top-down agreement in many senses doesn't work. But you raised the idea of in emission trading schemes, where if countries don't comply with their national inventories, they can be up for sanctions. But so you are opening the door to a form of sanctions for countries that don't comply, perhaps, with INDCs.
I think you can create compliance mechanisms that are more than saying if you fail to meet your target, you'll be sent to prison. I think there are different rules that you can introduce, and if you don't abide by those rules, I think you can introduce sanctions.
The Green Climate Fund is meeting this week in Zambia. Has it got off to a good start?
Well, you raise an interesting point in talking about the Green Climate Fund. I mean, one of the sanctions could be that if you have not submitted your emission inventory data on time, if you have not submitted your INDC, then you will not be eligible to submit proposals to the Green Climate Fund. That could be a very effective sanction.